I'm talking today about a network that you may not have heard of, and it's called the Employment Accessibility Resource Network. And it was founded by a number of organizations in the community, both employers and service providers who support people with various different types of disabilities, including Live, Work, Play. Keenan Weller has been involved with our initiative for a long time, and other interested stakeholders. I'm just going to go to the minutes. There we are. So United Way led this initiative, and the whole idea was that they recognized there was a real issue in our community. And people got together in 2010 because they wanted to raise awareness around the talent pool that is people with disabilities. A lot of the research that we have shows that for some reason, here in Ottawa, in our capital, the rate of unemployment among people with disabilities, regardless of whether you have an intellectual disability, a physical, a sensory, or the invisible one, the unemployment rate is higher. I'm not quite sure why. And it's higher than it is elsewhere in Ontario and in our province. So since Ontario wants to become the most accessible place that it can, and is looking at reaching accessibility in 2025 as their goal, here in Ottawa, in support of that goal, United Way, Ottawa, which is a big fundraiser, offered to lead this initiative. So our initiative is supported by lots of volunteers who sit on committees and who join the organization. And what we do is we bring everybody to the table to look at finding solutions to this issue. And when we say our goal is to increase employment opportunities, we mean real employment, so real work for real pay. As Keenan mentioned, people should be working if they are being paid for their services, their employment at minimum wage or better. And our EARN initiative, which is a network, has, when anybody wants to join our network, guiding principles which stipulate that your organization, if you're an employer and you want to join our network and take part in our activities, you have to agree that when you pay people with disabilities, you'll be abiding by all the legislation that's relevant, you'll be including people in the workplace, and paying them minimum wage or better. And in fact, when we developed our guiding principles that support what we're all about, Keenan was one of the people on the committee that helped develop those principles. And when we say people with disabilities, we mean all types of disabilities. So our service provider partners work sometimes with people with one disability, sometimes people with many disabilities, and it can be a visible one or an invisible one. I brought some buttons at the end for people to take, and one of the buttons says 70% of disabilities are invisible. And so even for someone with an intellectual barrier who faces a lot of systemic barriers to becoming employed, not everyone looks like they have a disability. And I'm certainly very aware that people with intellectual disabilities face a great number of barriers that other people with more disabilities that are now known about and recognized may not face as much. So what do we do? EARN's primary role is to act as a connector. What we do is bring partners to the table to advocate, to raise awareness about the talent pool that is people with disabilities. And we do that through networking and learning events. We do that through an annual conference to educate employers. And we do things like customized recruitment. Many of our employer partners and our service providers in Live, Work, Play do a heck of a lot of that, because as Keenan talked about, they've been able to place people with employers throughout Ottawa in a number of different types of workplaces. We've had the opportunity to do that through our network as well. So for example, one of our partners, employer partners, is Hydro Ottawa. And they came to us and they said, we've got a couple of jobs and we'd like to hire people with disabilities for those jobs. And we reached into our pool of service providers, and they submitted candidates, their clients, And through that process, they actually hired 2 people with disabilities to work at Hydro Ottawa. And we're trying to develop that with other employers or similar approaches with other employers. We also do mock interview practice sessions as well, and that's great. We've done it with the Adaptive Learning Program with the Ottawa Carleton District School Board. We're doing one on Monday, and so that's programs that take place in schools like Sir Guy Carleton and all across the school board, where if your son or daughter has an intellectual disability and you want to improve your job skills, or you want to improve your interview skills when you're going for a job, then you can practice. And so I'm going on Monday morning to pretend to be an employer, and I've got a couple of questions to ask young students with intellectual disabilities who will soon be graduating. And we'd certainly be happy to do that in other schools as well. And so the roles that people play is a little bit different depending on who they are and what they're all about. So employers, certainly what they want to do is promote employment and people with disabilities, so we have more inclusive and diverse workplaces. And I just gave an example of that with Hydro Ottawa, and there are many other examples. So when our employers join EARN, they're joining on the understanding that they want to open that door. You see the door that's in the A of EARN? Want to open that door a little wider to inclusion and invite more people with disabilities in. Our service providers have all the clients, and I'll talk in a little bit more about service providers who work with people with intellectual disabilities in a later slide. And job seekers, we want them to be as involved as they possibly can in the process of looking for a job. So when they're with clients, when they as clients are working with a service provider, we want them to be part of that employment journey and do as much as they can to be an active participant in that journey. Just like Keenan talked about when he sits people down and says, what do you want to do? What do you like? We don't want people displaced in jobs because that doesn't work. That's just a little bit about what we do. Now I'm going to talk about an issue which I've been kind of alluding to in the earlier slides, because when we talk about EARN being created to address barriers, to address stigma, because it's got to be there. People with disabilities as an untapped talent pool just are not as represented as much as we'd like them to be in Ottawa. So here's the old attitude issue on the part of the job seeker. There they are, wanting to be hired, but then on the part of the employer, fear, attitude, cost, stigma, barriers. We certainly know that there's a lot of fear on the part of employers, that they don't know a great deal, but we can combat this. And one handout that I brought with me, if you'd like to take a copy, is 10 myths about hiring people with disabilities. And you can address a lot of the fears of employers if you were acting in the role of service provider, or if you're supporting a service provider to work with your son or daughter. On the part of job seekers, I worked on a big national employment project for people with disabilities for about 6 years, and when we asked our career facilitators, what's the biggest barrier for job seekers with disabilities, regardless of their disability, regardless of their skills, they always said it was their own attitude of lack of self-confidence. So our career facilitators in that project I was involved in really worked hard to increase the self-confidence of the job seeker. On the part of employers, it was exactly that. It was the attitudinal barrier was the big issue for employers. So that's what EARN is seeking to do by raising awareness, by holding events, by welcoming more inclusive employers into our network, by actively involving our service providers in increasing their skills and providing supports to them, so that we can take down that wall. We don't want to build the wall up, as a nameless person south of the border has been talking about. We want to take down that wall. So we don't want that gentleman there to be putting more bricks in. We want more bricks to come out of the wall. So basically, we've talked a little bit about that. And now, I want to talk to you a little bit about a service provider. I mentioned that our members are employers and service providers and other interested stakeholders. We have a number of employer partners, well over 20, close to 25, and some of them work with people with all different types of disabilities, and some of them focus a little bit more on people with one particular type of disability. So for example, the Canadian Hearing Society is a member of EARN, so they would provide employment counseling supports to people who are hard of hearing or deaf as their primary disability. But I mentioned a couple of organizations here that you know only too well now, because Keenan Weller was the keynote. He works for Live, Work, Play. They provide services to people with intellectual disabilities. Partners in Parenting is another organization that's fairly new to Ottawa, and when you go to one of the other workshops later on today, Beth Buckland will be speaking from Partners in Parenting, and they are a service provider member of EARN, and their whole target group is people with intellectual disabilities. And I think they have some educational programs as well as employment programs. But I also wanted to highlight two other organizations, service providers that are members of the EARN network who work with people with disabilities. Causeway Work Center. Now their primary group of people they work with are people who have mental health problems. And you know that's one of the biggest stigmas, that's really tough. But if you have an intellectual disability, it doesn't mean to say that you can't have another one as well. Many people with disabilities have more than one. Myself as an example. So if your son or daughter has some mental health issues, like is dealing with depression or has some phobias or anxiety, then the Causeway Work Center might be an option for them. They have, for example, they run a program called Crackers Catering. And I don't know, are you familiar with Crackers Catering? No? Okay, it's a catering service where they train people to work in the catering business, to work in cooking and that kind of thing. And so some of the people that, work in that program would have not only mental health, but they might also have severe learning disabilities, or they might have some intellectual disabilities as well. It's a tough program to get into, there's a big wait list, but they do all kinds of other work placements as well. And this would be someone, I think, who has a fair bit of potential to work in, in employment. And another organization is Performance Plus. They have a big long name, Performance Plus, Rehabilitative Care. We call them PPRC for short. And although they work a lot with people with learning disabilities and all kinds of other disabilities, they also do have clients who are job seekers with intellectual disabilities. Sphere is another one that I mentioned. They aren't a service provider. They are funded through the Opportunities Fund. They're originally from Quebec, and now in the last year or so, they've got funding to spread all across Canada. And they are a partner organization that works directly with the service providers. And what that means is they don't work with parents, they don't work with families, but if a service provider says, I have a client, person A or person B, and I've got a job for this person, but this individual is going to need a lot of job coaching to learn the job and to be successful to stay in the job. Well, service providers like all these that I mentioned here, they can provide limited job coaching of all of the four that are mentioned: Live, Work, Play, Partners in Parenting, Causeway, and Performance Plus. I would say Live, Work, Play could probably provide the most in terms of job coaching funding, but they will often charge for those services because they can't pay for them any other way. I know that Live, Work, Play, and Keenan would be able to tell us this better, has got more support now from ODSP, but this is where Sphere comes in. If a service provider like someone who works for Live, Work, Play, or Partners in Parenting, or Performance Plus, goes to Sphere, they'd say, I've got a client who to succeed and stay in this job needs lots of job coaching. Can you give us some funding for job coaching? And they would then work with the service provider who's providing the employment counseling and assessment and counseling and help with job placement, and they would then provide the funding. And they've got a lot of money, and they're just here in Ontario, and they can do it for job coaching, for transportation, They will do some wage subsidies, and through ODSP there are limited wage subsidies too. But Keenan made the point in his address that wage subsidies just keep that person in a job for about 14 weeks.
Yeah.
After that 14 weeks, if they aren't really delighted with the person, or if the organization is small, without the wage subsidy, which doesn't pay all, but it pays a part of the person's salary, they will find that the person will get dropped. And I can just tell you from my own experience that I did a little bit of counseling for one of EARN's service providers for almost 2 years. One of my clients, a lovely young woman with communication and intellectual disabilities, really hard worker, loved the food industry. She got a job with a local employer, I won't mention the name. They happily took her on. This is a successful company. And after the first 14 weeks were up, they said, can we have another wage subsidy now? Because we'd like to keep her. Well, no, unfortunately not. So we tried another organization which had a different form of wage subsidies, not provincial but federal, and they said, well, she's already had one, we can't do it. So her service provider, which was Performance Plus, had to go back and find her another employer so she could work somewhere else.
Yeah.
And now she has actually stayed in that job. I am so proud of her. She went through, the adults high school, and she overcame a lot of barriers, not just an intellectual disability, but also she has a mild autism. But she loves food, and she has really succeeded. And I'm told that they're going to be making a video about her soon, so when we have one, we'll put it on our website. So EARN can benefit you as a parent or someone working with people with disabilities by having access to these particular service providers, and we have more than 20, but I highlighted the ones that work with people with intellectual disabilities. And also, if you are with a service provider, and that service provider is a member of this broader network, EARN, which is all about bringing people together, say we could send out a message saying, we've got some mock interview practice, your son or daughter is ready for job seeking. We've got spouts for 12 people, so your service provider could put your son or daughter's name forward. So by knowing more about EARN and getting involved with a service provider with EARN and more inclusive employers, you indirectly increase your network and the people you know. So now I'm going to talk, I'm just mindful of my time and the need for questions. I'm going to talk a little about you as a parent, because your question, Asma, was absolutely pertinent to that. You as a parent, if you called me up and said, I've heard about EARN, I want to join, I have a son who needs a job, I wouldn't be able to help you directly because I'd say we're a network, and I would refer you to a service provider.
Yeah.
What a lot of parents do when they get really desperate is that they try to approach employers directly themselves. Because they think
doesn't work.
Doesn't work.
No.
Oh, wow. You got my point straight away. Because say you live in a neighborhood and there are several different employers, and you think, I walk down the street every day to go to the bus stop to go to work, right? Drive past this particular employer every day when I'm coming home from work or when I'm grocery shopping. I should drop in. I've gotten to know this person. I've used their company services. For example, I go to this local Loblaws. Maybe my son could work at the Loblaws. Typically, it doesn't work because an employer gets a bit scared. They know you want the best for your son or daughter. They know that your heart is in the right place, but if they don't have a job that's specific to what your son or daughter needs, that won't open the door to employment. It'll close the door. They'll think, oh, here comes Mrs. So-and-so again. Okay, I'm going to be busy. I'm going to my break now. Because they don't want to disappoint you. They don't want to say no, but they can't necessarily help you. Now, the only caveat to that would be if it was your own family business, or if it was a very close friend or a family member's business or company that they worked for. This wouldn't work in the public sector or in the government sector, but for private companies it could work. But generally speaking, it's going to close the door pretty tight. You also don't want to apply for a job without telling your son or daughter. This has happened. It happened to me when I was a job seeker. I registered with the government. I wrote an exam for jobs with the federal government. And I registered with somebody and I got a call out of the blue for a job as an admin assistant. So, how fast can you type? Well, it's never been my forte. You know, I've got a degree in psychology and a bit of counseling background, but so it put me in a very embarrassing position because I didn't even know my resume had been put forward. And when I worked as an employment counselor, I find some of my colleagues would do that too. And I'd say, no, that's the worst thing you can do, because if the person gets called directly and they don't know, that throws them off completely. And it may not be the right job, and they might blow a chance that might have been a possibility. And then also it's important if you're helping your son or daughter with a CV, I would say leave that to the professionals, leave it to the service providers. You can help your son or daughter if that person doesn't have very good literacy skills and isn't good at writing things down, by maybe sending them with a list or coming to the appointment and saying, we're going to work together to create a CV, so I as the parent can give you lots of information. I've written down some points, and that would help the service provider create a good CV. And a CV has to be relevant for your son and daughter. Some people are very high, have pretty good jobs themselves, and they might create a CV that looks fabulous, but it doesn't represent that young person. It just does not. And an employer's going to know that straight away. You know, a little bit like those grade 2 projects. I would go in, my late husband was blind, I'm visually impaired, and our daughter would go in and she would have her project she made for herself. Then you go in and see these fantastic, like a floor plan for a whole house. And you could say, this young man's father or mother is an architect. But a grade 2 7-year-old without a disability could not produce this. There's no way. So I would always go and tell the teacher, this is my daughter's best effort, it's not our effort. The same thing with a resume. It is a professional document, it has to be well done, no spelling mistakes, clear and simple, but it has to reflect that person. We had a professional resume writer when I was an employment counselor. I would sit down with each person and say, does this reflect you? She's written a great profile of you, but if you have autism, great interpersonal skills may not be what you put on your resume. If your son or daughter can't communicate very well, maybe they have other strengths, so the resume is going to profile those strengths. And sometimes we would also, when I worked in HR as well, and people would apply for jobs, and sometimes parents would actually do the letter, and they'd write the letter and accompany it with a resume. And then they'd say something like, if it was the person themselves, the person would say, I'm just prepared to do anything, I just want a job. Or the parent would say, my son or daughter would just do anything, they just want a job. That's useless. Because the employer says, well, what job? Pass to the next resume. That doesn't really help. So that's why it's great having a service provider to support you. I would say the last point would be that it's really important not to just assume what your son or daughter would like, but to know their likes and dislikes. So maybe somebody might end up doing a job cleaning or serving or putting things away, as Royce did in a car dealership, but they might have a particular interest. They might like sports or entertaining or cooking or working in a store or serving coffee. They could have any number of interests. So it's important to find the person's interests, the young person's interests, before you find the job. I know this sounds obvious, but it's amazing sometimes how we miss things. What does work is belonging to networks. Not you personally belonging to EARN, but being involved with a service provider who belongs to our network. Because if a service provider belongs to our network, and we've got most of the organizations in Ottawa, then they'll be able to reach out and say, there's a workshop coming up, or there's a learning opportunity, or there's something going on, and it might be of interest to your son or daughter. And you might meet somebody who can't help you, but the more networks, the more relationships you build through creating positive relationships, which take time. It's more a case of someone knows someone who knows someone. And often it's that outer ring where surprisingly you might find out about something. So building a positive relationship with the service provider, that means I'm sure you'd be very welcome to go to some of the appointments with your son or daughter, but at a certain point kind of pull back. Because as an employment counselor, I know I was doing my very best to try to help people to find jobs or to pull in a job developer who would do that. But we would always tell people it's going to take time. It may not be easy. We might find somebody like that or we may not. So we would love you to be on our side, but it makes it harder if a parent is constantly intervening. However, be your son or daughter's advocate. Keep in touch with us. Find out what's happening. We'd love to have that relationship, I would say, when I was an employment counselor. Love your perspective, be involved in the process, but also let your son or daughter be as independent as they can be. So again, just knowing their likes and dislikes, I put that again because I thought it can't be emphasized enough. If you don't have your son or daughter on your side, like it doesn't work. It's important to know that your son or daughter really wants to look for work too, because you would be on board with them having a job, but maybe your son or daughter isn't yet. So it's really important to understand their goals, their wishes, their likes, and their dislikes. This is a sort of newer area. It's called social enterprise. I don't know if you're familiar with that term. Social enterprise is a little bit controversial because I know when Keenan was doing his keynote,
He said something like that.
yeah, it's I didn't because I was setting up here, I wasn't able to hear the very beginning of his talk. I know that the big thing is to include people with disabilities when they're working in the workforce as part of a regular workforce where there are lots of other people in that workforce with and without disabilities. Social enterprise, though, may be an option for some people, and it's called social enterprise because it's an enterprise that exists to make money, but it also is there to serve a social purpose, to break down barriers for people who might otherwise have a very difficult time becoming employed. So social enterprises might be a group of young people. For example, I work for a national not-for-profit, and there are a group of ladies, I call them ladies, old-fashioned term, young women who came to water our plants twice a week. And they would go out in groups of 2, and they went to all sorts of offices all around the city of Ottawa and watered plants. And the 2 young women had intellectual disabilities. They were paid to do that. And that was a social enterprise that was set up where all the people who worked in it were people with disabilities, intellectual disabilities or others as well. And they would have a manager or a supervisor who was running that program. And many of them are really quite successful. And Christian Horizons is one organization which isn't a member of EARN, but if you're interested, they do have some programs where they will help train people to work, for example, in woodworking. That's a big one. Or they might do a little bit of, they do some piecework in making jewelry. I believe that if anybody works and works in woodworking or finishes furniture, they do get paid minimum wage or more. But the jewelry making might be piecework. And so that could be an option for some of you to consider. There's also the Center for, it's called CSED, the Center for Innovative Social Enterprise Development. And I put the website there because they've got lots of information about other types of social enterprises. And that might be a way for your son or daughter to start out. And I know Christian Horizons in Toronto is working with their local community college to work on a food prep program. And I believe Christian Horizons is working with Algonquin College for students who are interested in food prep and to provide a really good training opportunity for young people with intellectual disabilities. Our vision then is that through the work of all of our partners, employers and service providers, that every workplace in our community will be accessible and inclusive for people with disabilities as a result of the pro-impact proactive impact of our network of learning. So we convene, we bring people together, and we work together on the issue of breaking down those barriers. In the remaining time that I have left, I wanted to talk about a project that EARN has that we just began in late November of last year. And it's about the AODA. Are you familiar with the AODA? Okay, the AODA stands for the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act. And it's a law that sets out a process for developing and enforcing accessibility standards. And its goal is to make Ontario accessible as we can possibly be by 2025. Ontario is working to be the most accessible province in our country, and we have had this legislation in place for 12 years now. It was passed in 2005. And now there is a real push with the 12th anniversary of the AODA to get companies and organizations around the province, anyone who has one or more employees, to become more inclusive. And I'll tell you a little bit about what it's about. First of all, it's all about accessibility, for giving people opportunities to participate in daily life. And what it's about is inclusion, changing attitudes, and opening doors, just like our network does. And specifically, it does this through having 5 standards in the legislation. One is customer service, and that means accessible customer service. How can I help you is the best question that you can ask. Information and communications, all around making information accessible for people who have vision loss or in other ways of print handicap. Employment, so making workplaces inclusive. Transportation, and this is more for municipalities and hospitals to make sure they have accessible vehicles. And design of public spaces, so if you're going on a beach, going on a boardwalk, it's as accessible as it can be. Now more about the standards, and you'll see that employment is highlighted in bold because that's what we're talking about here, and that's what EARN is all about. Customer service is about influencing attitudes and behaviors. Information I mentioned is helping people with disabilities access information and communications, such as forms, documents, and websites, or in human rights cases, put forward because people couldn't access information on the website in an accessible way to apply for jobs. It's about transportation, making it easier for everybody to travel, and it's about making public spaces more accessible. And the actual inside spaces, like where we are inside the school, that accessibility of that, for example, I came up in an elevator, that's governed by the building code. Now, I'll just like to highlight employment, though. It's making hiring and employee support practices more accessible. And I just brought a little double-sided one-pager there. If you'd like to take one, you're welcome to do so. And it's all about the employment standard. And I really highlight it because as more employers become knowledgeable of the AODA, workplaces become more inclusive. Inclusive workplaces benefit everybody, and that means more job opportunities for people with intellectual disabilities. So I highlight this legislation and this standard for all of you because you are employees. I might have someone sitting in this room who's a stay-at-home mom or dad, but you're employees. So your organization should know about the AODA. And we have a project, and we're very happy to inform people here in the Ottawa area about it. And it's important for your employers to know, because the more your employers know, then you as an employee can tell them about the AODA, then down the road that creates more opportunities for people like Bashar who face a lot of barriers. And so it's important that you know that there's a big rush now to encourage and really advocate for more employers to become more accessible. I was on a call just earlier this week, and I was told that people at the Accessibility Directorate, and that's the part of the provincial government that works on the AODA, are in the process of sending out 45,000 emails across the province to encourage more employers to become accessible. Because to date, there was a recent EMO study showing only 3 out of 10 employers hired people with disabilities in our area. And that number needs to go up. So through the work that EARN is doing to encourage more public awareness, through the work that we're doing to promote the AODA, our goal is to push for more accessibility and more inclusion for people with intellectual disabilities and for all disabilities. So that is the talk that I've given you for today, is to give you some background information and to help you think about developing those relationships and increasing those partnerships with other organizations.